the roar of distant artillery, the acrid smell of burning cities, and the deafening silence before a mission that many knew they would never return from. This is the hidden face of World War II. While history books often celebrate the large-scale battles and famous generals, there exists another layer of the war, a world defined by peril, desperation, and missions that were as close to suicidal as a human being could survive. These are the stories of soldiers who faced near certain death, not for glory, but for the fragile hope of tipping the scales in a war that consumed the globe. Imagine stepping into a landing craft at dawn, knowing that every wave could be your last, or crawling through dense forests with the enemy mere feet away, carrying explosives that could end your life in an instant. From the freezing tundras of the Eastern Front to the sun-scorched islands of the Pacific, World War II was not only fought on battlefields, but in the hearts of men and women who accepted missions with no guarantee of survival. These operations demanded unimaginable courage, strategic brilliance, and a willingness to confront mortality head-on. They were the unspeakable missions, operations so extreme that many soldiers never even made it home to tell their tales. Today, we will uncover the untold stories of these dangerous World War II missions, the suicide raids, extreme reconnaissance operations, and covert attacks that shaped the outcome of the war, yet remain largely forgotten. Through first-hand accounts, historical context, and cinematic retelling, we'll honor the courage of those who ventured into the jaws of death. Forever etched into the shadows of history, the Pacific theater of World War II was a place of unimaginable violence, where the ocean became a battlefield and the sky a path to death. By 1944, the Japanese military, facing overwhelming Allied forces and dwindling resources, resorted to tactics that defied logic and highlighted the extremes of human sacrifice. Among these, the kamikaze attacks stand out as some of the most dangerous and psychologically harrowing missions of the war. Kamikaze, meaning divine wind, were suicide missions in which pilots deliberately crashed their planes, loaded with explosives, into Allied ships. The goal was simple, but horrifying: to inflict maximum damage at the cost of their own lives. The men who volunteered for these operations were often very young, barely out of their teens, yet trained to believe that ultimate honor came through self-sacrifice for the emperor and the nation. The missions were meticulously planned, yet the very nature of the operation made survival impossible. Pilots would take off from makeshift airfields, knowing that their path would end in a fiery collision with an enemy vessel. For the sailors aboard the ships, the attacks were like living nightmares, small silhouettes in the sky transforming into deadly projectiles, exploding on impact with terrifying force. Eyewitness accounts describe the surreal horror of these moments, the deafening roar of engines, the blinding flashes of explosions, and the screams of men caught in the chaos. Entire ships were destroyed in a matter of minutes, with men trapped below decks, unable to escape the inferno. Psychologically, kamikaze missions had an impact beyond the physical destruction. Allied soldiers and sailors reported a creeping dread whenever enemy aircraft appeared on the horizon, knowing that some pilots would not attempt to evade or survive. They were coming solely to kill. Yet, while the attacks were strategically effective in slowing Allied advances and sinking critical ships, the human cost was staggering. Japan lost thousands of pilots, young men trained for war only to die in a single, deliberate act. Diaries and letters reveal a mixture of fear, duty, and resignation among these pilots. Some wrote of seeing their fellow airmen take off, knowing they would not return, yet still preparing themselves for the same fate with quiet determination. These missions were not merely military operations. They were profound statements of desperation, culture, and sacrifice. Kamikaze pilots embodied a brutal wartime ethos where national survival was placed above individual life. While the world remembers major battles like Midway or Iwo Jima, the silent stories of these suicide pilots, their courage, terror, and humanity, are often forgotten. Their actions, terrifying and tragic, serve as a stark reminder of the extremes to which humans will go in the chaos of total war, where life and death were often a matter of inches and seconds. These missions left an indelible mark on history, showing the true cost of fanaticism, honor, and survival in the deadliest conflict the world has ever known. In the winter of 1943, the rugged mountains of Norway became the stage for one of the most daring and high-stakes missions of World War II. Operation Gunnerside. Deep in Nazi-occupied territory, the Germans had established a heavy water plant at Vemork, a facility critical to their ambitions of developing a nuclear weapon. The Allies, fully aware of the catastrophic potential of a German atomic bomb, knew that this facility had to be stopped at all costs. The mission to sabotage. It was not simply a matter of strategy, it was a venture into extreme danger, a test of human endurance, courage, and precision under the harshest conditions imaginable. A small team of Norwegian commandos, trained by the British Special Operations Executive, was chosen for the operation. They parachuted into snowbound forests in the dead of winter, each step through the icy wilderness a struggle against frostbite, fatigue, and the constant fear of discovery. The terrain itself was as formidable an enemy as the German soldiers they sought to evade. Blizzards, frozen rivers, and sheer cliffs turned every movement into a battle for survival. The commandos relied on their training, camouflage, and intimate knowledge of the local landscape to navigate these deadly conditions, fully aware that one wrong move could mean capture. Or worse. The planning of Operation Gunnerside was meticulous. The team had to infiltrate a heavily guarded facility, perched on a plateau, surrounded by mountains and patrolled by alert guards. They moved under the cover of night, using the shadows and the frozen terrain to their advantage. The tension was unbearable. Every noise, the crunch of snow, the distant howl of the wind, could betray their presence. Personal accounts from the commandos reveal moments of near panic, but also an unyielding determination. They knew that the success of the mission could alter the course of the war, preventing the Nazis from obtaining a weapon of unimaginable destruction. When the team finally reached the plant, they faced the final, critical challenge: planting explosives on the heavy water production equipment without being detected. Every second counted. Every mistake could be fatal. The commandos worked quickly and silently, hearts pounding, muscles trembling from cold and exertion. And then, in a controlled explosion, the facility was sabotaged. The mission was a complete success, and remarkably, the team managed to escape back through the snow-laden forests, evading capture in one of the most perilous environments of the entire war. Operation Gunnerside stands as a testament to the extraordinary bravery and resilience of those who undertook extreme wartime missions. These men faced freezing temperatures, physical exhaustion, and the omnipresent threat of death, yet they remained focused on their objective. Their actions not only hindered the Nazi nuclear program, but also demonstrated the profound impact that a small, determined group could have on the larger war effort. The story of Gunnerside is not just a tale of strategy or sabotage. It is a story of human courage, of individuals willing to risk everything in the shadow of certain peril to change the course of history. It reminds us that in World War II, some of the most critical victories were won not on open battlefields, but in silence, under the cover of darkness, by those who accepted extreme danger as part of their mission. In August 1942, the remote atolls of the Gilbert Islands became the unlikely stage for one of the boldest and most dangerous missions of the early Pacific War. The Makin Island Raid. The operation, carried out by a small force of United States Marines, was conceived not only as a strike against Japanese positions, but also as a reconnaissance mission designed to gather critical intelligence for the larger campaign to come. At a time when the Allies were still reeling from losses in the Philippines and the fall of other Pacific strongholds, the raid represented a high-risk gamble, a test of courage and ingenuity in a theater defined by extreme danger. The Marines faced an array of challenges before the mission even began. They embarked on long, treacherous voyages across open ocean in flimsy rubber boats, knowing that enemy patrols, unpredictable currents, and the vastness of the Pacific could doom the operation before it even reached the shore. Upon landing, they encountered a hostile landscape that was both unfamiliar and unforgiving. Coral reefs tore at their craft. Jagged rocks threatened to capsize them, and dense vegetation offered little cover from vigilant Japanese defenders. From the first step on the sand, the men were acutely aware that capture could mean torture or death, and that even survival would require resourcefulness and nerve. The raid itself was a masterclass in improvisation under fire. The Marines moved swiftly, sabotaging installations, destroying supplies, and taking prisoners, all while evading constant enemy surveillance. Nights were spent navigating the island's treacherous terrain, avoiding patrols, and improvising shelters from what little the island could provide. Letters and personal accounts from those who participated paint a vivid picture of exhaustion and fear, but also of an unwavering determination. They endured tropical heat, limited rations, and the psychological strain of knowing that one mistake could lead to death, yet they pressed forward with a singular focus on their mission objectives. The Makin Island Raid was not without cost. Casualties were high, and the return journey posed its own perils, as the Marines had to navigate enemy-controlled waters under the constant threat of attack. Yet the intelligence gathered and the psychological impact on both Allied and Japanese forces were invaluable. The operation demonstrated that even small, high-risk missions could yield strategic advantages far beyond the number of troops involved. The bravery and ingenuity of the Marines involved became a blueprint for future reconnaissance and sabotage operations throughout the Pacific War. More than a military action, the Makin Island Raid embodies the human dimension of extreme operations in World War II. The fear, the improvisation, and the courage required when the odds of survival are slim. It highlights how a handful of determined individuals, operating under immense pressure and facing near certain danger, could influence the broader trajectory of the war. In the shadow of the Pacific's vast expanse, these Marines ventured into danger with a resolve that continues to resonate, reminding us that some of the most pivotal and daring moments of World War II were fought not in grand battle lines, but in the quiet, deadly precision of small, extreme missions. Deep in the jungles of Burma, far from the beaches of Normandy or the islands of the Pacific, a unique and grueling campaign unfolded that tested the limits of human endurance, courage, and ingenuity. The Chindits, a special unit composed of British and Indian soldiers, were tasked with penetrating deep behind Japanese lines in a theater where conventional warfare often seemed impossible. The dense jungle, teeming with disease, insects, and hidden enemy forces, became both battlefield and prison, demanding extreme physical and mental fortitude. These soldiers carried out missions that were as dangerous as they were unconventional, relying on stealth, endurance, and resourcefulness in conditions that would break most men. Their operations began with arduous treks through thick undergrowth, swamps, and steep ridges, often under the oppressive heat and humidity of the Burmese jungle. Malaria, dysentery, and other tropical diseases claimed nearly as many lives as the enemy. Yet the Chindits pressed on. Supplies were limited, and resupply missions were often impossible due to the remoteness of their positions. Soldiers improvised with what they could find, consuming whatever rations or food sources the jungle offered, all while carrying heavy loads of ammunition, explosives, and equipment. Every day was a struggle for survival, a battle against both the environment and the enemy. The Chindits' missions involved sabotage, reconnaissance, and the disruption of Japanese supply lines. They ambushed convoys, destroyed bridges, and sabotaged communication networks, striking fear into the occupying forces. But it was not just the physical challenges that tested them. The psychological strain was immense. Operating in small units, isolated from friendly forces, with death constantly looming in every shadow, soldiers were forced to rely on unwavering trust in their comrades and in their own resilience. Letters home and diary entries from these men reveal the stark contrast between terror and camaraderie. The ever-present fear of ambush balanced by moments of shared laughter and determination that allowed them to endure the horrors of their mission. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Chindit campaigns was the sheer audacity of operating so far behind enemy lines with minimal support. They faced constant patrols, sniper fire, and artillery attacks, yet their unconventional tactics proved devastatingly effective. The Japanese forces, unaccustomed to fighting in such an unpredictable and unforgiving environment, struggled to respond. Every bridge destroyed, every supply line disrupted, and every successful ambush amplified the strategic impact of these small, elite units. The Chindits became an instrument of psychological warfare, as much as a military force, demonstrating the power of mobility, surprise, and extreme endurance in a theater where traditional armies could be bogged down for months. The story of the Chindits is not merely one of military achievement, it is a testament to human courage and resilience in extreme conditions. These men endured isolation, disease, and relentless danger, yet pressed forward with determination and ingenuity. Their efforts in the jungles of Burma highlight the extraordinary sacrifices made in lesser-known theaters of World War II and remind us that some of the most critical contributions to victory were carried out far from the headlines, in the silence of the jungle, by those willing to embrace extreme danger in the service of a greater mission. Their story endures as a powerful example of courage, resourcefulness, and the human spirit under the most harrowing conditions imaginable. On the Eastern Front of World War II, the scale of human suffering and the intensity of combat reached unimaginable levels. Here, the Soviet Union faced the full force of the German Wehrmacht, a mechanized army with superior equipment, training, and early momentum. In response, Soviet commanders frequently resorted to extreme measures, deploying soldiers in missions that were little more than near certain death sentences. These were the infamous suicide missions, carried out by penal battalions, volunteers, and frontline soldiers who were often given little support or hope of survival. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, these men and women exhibited a courage and determination that has become emblematic of the brutal reality of the Eastern Front. One of the most harrowing examples of these operations occurred during the Battle of Stalingrad, a turning point in the war that symbolized both Soviet resilience and the ferocity of the conflict. Soldiers were ordered to attack heavily fortified German positions, often with minimal artillery support, through open ground under relentless machine, gun and artillery fire. Survival rates were grim, and the distinction between heroism and futility was razor-thin. Personal accounts from survivors recount the deafening roar of artillery, the acrid smoke of burning buildings, and the endless waves of soldiers falling around them. Many describe the surreal mixture of terror and resolve, the awareness that their own death was likely, yet the drive to push forward for the sake of comrades and the motherland was stronger than the instinct to flee. Penal battalions, composed of men convicted of military or civilian offenses, were particularly exposed to these extreme operations. They were often sent first into assaults, clearing minefields, breaching barbed wire defenses, and drawing enemy fire away from more strategically critical units. Despite the stigma attached to these soldiers, they displayed extraordinary bravery, knowing that their actions, though potentially fatal, were essential to the larger mission. Letters and diaries reveal the human cost in vivid detail, the fear, the exhaustion, and the quiet acts of solidarity that allowed soldiers to face impossible odds. Many perished, but their sacrifice slowed the German advance, bought precious time, and ultimately contributed to the Soviet counteroffensive that would push the invaders back. The extreme nature of these missions underscores the desperation and scale of the conflict on the Eastern Front. Unlike other theaters, where mobility or technology could dictate outcomes, here survival was often a matter of sheer will and endurance. Soldiers had to endure harsh winters, supply shortages, and the constant threat of encirclement, all while executing operations that bordered on suicidal. Yet in the midst of this, acts of ingenuity, leadership, and resilience emerged, small pockets of defiance that altered the flow of battle and embodied the Soviet commitment to victory at any cost. The story of these missions is a stark reminder of the human toll of World War II, particularly in the Eastern Front, where strategy and survival often collided in the most extreme ways imaginable. Soviet suicide missions reflect both the desperation of a nation under siege and the extraordinary courage of ordinary people thrust into unimaginable circumstances. They highlight the profound human cost of victory, where bravery and sacrifice were inseparable from fear and loss. These operations, though often overshadowed by larger battles and famous generals, remain a testament to the extremes of human endurance and the tragic, heroic dimensions of war.